The world owes over $300 trillion. That's not a typo. It's 3 times more than everything the planet produces in a year. Sound insane? It kind of is. Every country is borrowing. Every country is lending. And somehow, the system keeps spinning. Here's the wild part. This isn't some recent screw-up. Debt has been around longer than money itself. And today, it's the core mechanic keeping the modern economy alive. Schools get built, wars get fought, recessions get cushioned, all with borrowed cash. But what if the lending stops? What if the cycle breaks? Let's pull the thread. Like this kind of breakdown? Hit subscribe. Start with this. America owes $36 trillion. China? Over $18 trillion. And weirdly, they both owe each other. U.S. banks hold Chinese debt. Chinese banks own U.S. treasuries. European funds are holding both. And guess what? China is also borrowing from Chinese banks. Who are lending to Europe? Who are investing back into the U.S. confused? That's the point. Global debt isn't a straight line. It's a giant loop. Everyone's lending, everyone's borrowing, and no one's standing still. Zoom out, and the world looks like a tangled web of IOUs, a closed system where money never really leaves. It just keeps moving in circles. So when people ask, who's actually getting paid? The answer is everyone and no one. This isn't just finance. It's the plumbing of the modern world, and it runs way deeper than most people think. Debt isn't new. It's older than money, older than coins, older than banks. Imagine this. It's 5,000 years ago. You lend your neighbor a sack of grain in the spring. At harvest, they pay you back, maybe with a little extra. No contracts, no interest rates, just trust. That was debt. A promise. I'll give you something now. You return the favor later. Fast forward a few thousand years, and that simple idea evolved. Villages became cities. Cities became empires. And empires needed a lot more than sacks of grain. Ships, castles, cannons, wars. But even kings didn't have the cash up front. So they borrowed, and debt scaled from personal favors to global infrastructure. At its core, debt is still the same. Borrow from tomorrow to solve a problem today. But now, it runs the whole show. It's the 1600s. England's broke. King Charles II wants to go to war with the Dutch. But the treasury's empty, and the nobles won't cough up a dime. So, they try something new. They sell pieces of debt to the public. Citizens hand over cash. In return, a promise. You'll get it back with interest. These promises had a name: bonds. It sounds simple. It was. But it changed everything. Now, governments could raise massive amounts of money without raising taxes. Need a navy? Sell bonds? Rebuild after war? Bonds? Fight another war? More bonds. By the 20th century, debt had gone global. World War I, World War II. Entire nations were borrowing like never before, not just to fight, but to rebuild the world. Then came the real shift. In 1944, global leaders agreed to anchor world currencies to the US dollar. And the dollar? It was backed by gold. Until it wasn't. For a while, the system worked. Dollars were tied to gold. Other currencies were tied to the dollar. It felt solid, predictable. But then came the problem: growth. The US was printing more dollars to fuel spending, but there wasn't enough gold to back it all. The math didn't add up. So in 1971, President Nixon pulled the plug. Goodbye, gold standard. From that moment on, money was no longer backed by anything physical, just trust and a government's word. It became what we now call fiat currency. And with that shift, a new reality emerged. Governments could now create money at will. What used to be a tool for emergencies became a strategy for everything. Build schools, borrow. Fix roads, borrow. Fight recessions? You guessed it, borrow. Debt wasn't just part of the system anymore. It was the system. Here's where things get weird. The US owes $36 trillion. But guess what? About 70% of that is owed to Americans themselves. Yeah, the US government is mostly borrowing from its own people. Here's how it works. When you put money in the bank, it doesn't just sit there. The bank invests it. And one of their favorite things to buy? Government bonds. Same goes for pension funds, insurance companies, and investment firms. Bonds are safe, steady, and predictable. A guaranteed paycheck with almost zero risk. So when the government issues bonds to raise money, your savings might be what's buying them. Then the government pays interest on those bonds, and that money flows right back to banks, retirement accounts, and insurance firms. And what do they do with it? Buy more bonds. It's a loop. Savings become loans. Loans fund the government. The government pays interest. The cycle repeats. On paper, it sounds circular. In reality, it's how the entire economy stays in motion. Now, take that loop and scale it globally. It's not just the US borrowing from itself. Every major economy is doing the same, and also borrowing from each other. Japanese savings fund Dutch investments. Dutch money flows into Brazil. Brazilian reserves get parked in US bonds. It's not a chain. It's a circle. Money endlessly cycling between governments, banks, and investors around the world. Roughly 30% of US debt is held overseas, but that doesn't mean some foreign giant is pulling strings. It's just other countries, doing exactly what the US is doing, parking their cash somewhere safe and earning interest. This global loop is surprisingly stable. Until it isn't. Because when money constantly moves in circles, one slowdown anywhere can ripple everywhere. It's all connected, and that's both the system's greatest strength and its biggest risk. Here's the trick no one likes to talk about. Governments don't really pay off debt. They just roll it over. That means when a loan comes due, they borrow new money to pay off the old one. Same debt, just with a fresh coat of paint. Sounds reckless? It kind of is. But it's also the foundation of how the modern system works. As long as investors trust the government to keep paying interest, they'll keep lending. And as long as they keep lending, the cycle keeps spinning. It's like refinancing your mortgage over and over, forever. So technically, yes, the US and almost every other country is in a constant state of debt. But in this system, that's the plan. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Debt fuels growth. When governments borrow and spend, money flows into the economy. Businesses earn more. People get hired. Wages go up. Spending increases. The economy grows. It's a feedback loop, and politicians know it. In the US, around 1 in every $4 the government spends is borrowed. That's the same slice of the budget that covers all education and welfare combined. Now imagine what happens if borrowing stops. Less spending, slower growth, job cuts. The whole cycle goes into reverse. We've seen it before. Greece, 2008. When investors stopped lending, the economy collapsed. Wages dropped. Unemployment soared. 25% of the economy just vanished. That's why no one wins elections promising to cut spending. It's political suicide. So the borrowing continues, not just to thrive, but sometimes just to survive. Sometimes debt isn't about growth. It's about keeping the lights on. Take 2020. The world shut down overnight. People stopped spending. Businesses froze. Tax revenue tanked. The only thing standing between total collapse and basic survival? Massive government borrowing. The US alone borrowed $3.8 trillion that year, nearly 20% of its entire economy. And it wasn't just America. China, Europe, developing nations, everyone hit the panic button. Because when people aren't spending, the government has to. There's no other option. But here's the catch. Once that borrowed money is gone, the debt remains. And when tomorrow's crisis hits, governments borrow again to cover yesterday's bills. In richer countries, that's manageable. Interest rates are low. Investors feel safe. But for developing nations, high borrowing costs turn every crisis into a debt trap. Borrowing isn't just a strategy anymore. It's the only way out. On the surface, everything looks fine. Projects are funded. Checks go out. The economy keeps humming. But underneath, something's shifting. As debt piles up, so do the interest payments. And every dollar spent paying old loans is a dollar not spent on schools, hospitals, or infrastructure. Right now, a debt to GDP ratio near 100% is considered normal. A few decades ago, that would have been a red alert. Why isn't anyone panicking? Because borrowing is still cheap, and lenders still believe they'll get paid back. But what if that changes? If trust fades, or if interest rates jump, the cost of debt can spike fast. And suddenly, the system that looked stable starts to wobble. The truth is, the system only works if confidence holds. Take that away, and everything gets a lot more expensive and a lot more fragile. When governments run out of money, there's one last lever to pull. Print more. Sounds simple, feels easy, but it comes with a cost: inflation. The more money in the system, the less each dollar is worth. Prices rise, savings shrink. Everyone feels poorer. In small doses, inflation can be managed. But if it spirals, it gets ugly fast. Venezuela, 2000s tens. The government printed billions to pay its bills. Within months, a loaf of bread cost millions of bolivars. Savings vanished. The currency collapsed. Most countries won't go full Venezuela, but even moderate inflation hurts, especially for countries that borrow in foreign currencies like US dollars. If their local currency drops in value, paying back that debt gets way more expensive, even if they didn't borrow more. Inflation doesn't just hit consumers. It shakes the whole foundation of trust that debt depends on. So what happens when a country just can't pay? They default, the national version of saying, "We're broke." It's rare, it's messy, and it shakes everything. Unlike missing a credit card payment, a sovereign default isn't just about bad credit. It's about lost confidence. No one wants to lend to a country that already bailed on its promises. And the options after that? None of them are good. Cut spending? That means layoffs, unrest, and shrinking economies. Raise taxes? That can backfire fast. Print more money? Hello, inflation. Some countries, like Sri Lanka or Pakistan, get stuck in this trap, borrowing just to pay interest on older loans. It's debt feeding on itself. And once that spiral starts, escaping it takes years, or even decades. So when people ask, why can't we just stop borrowing? The harsh answer is, Because the entire system depends on the borrowing never stopping. When faith in the system starts to crack, people look for something real. That's what we're seeing now. In 2025, gold prices are surging, up nearly 28% this year. Silver just hit a 30-year high. Even mining stocks are exploding. Why? Because when currencies feel shaky and governments are knee-deep in debt, investors want something that can't be printed out of thin air. Gold doesn't default. It doesn't inflate. It just sits there, solid, scarce, and trusted. Suddenly, companies sitting on untapped gold reserves are getting serious attention. Their assets are worth more than their stock price. Big institutions are loading up. This isn't just a trend, it's a signal. When people lose confidence in the loop, they run to what's outside it. And that tells us something big is shifting. Here's the big question. Can this system really keep going? For now, yes. Because as long as people keep lending, governments will keep borrowing. And as long as governments keep spending, economies will keep growing. It works until it doesn't. Every cycle, every crisis, every bailout, every bond, it all runs on trust. Trust that tomorrow's money will be worth something. Trust that the system won't snap. But cracks are showing. Debt is rising faster than growth. Interest payments are eating bigger chunks of national budgets, and inflation, once rare, is now back on the global radar. So no, the system won't collapse overnight, but it's getting heavier, slower, riskier. And while most people aren't watching, the smart money is moving toward gold, toward real assets, toward anything outside the loop. Because deep down, everyone knows you can borrow from the future, but not forever. Debt built the modern world. It fuels our growth, funds our futures, and fills the gaps when crises hit. But behind the numbers is a fragile truth. This system only works if it keeps moving. The money doesn't stand still. It loops from savers to governments, from investors to banks, from one country to another, spinning faster, growing bigger. And yet, the further we push it, the more we're borrowing not just from tomorrow's budgets, but from tomorrow itself. Because at some point, the math stops working. Confidence cracks. The loop stutters. And when that day comes, the system doesn't explode. It unwinds, slowly and painfully. So we're left with a choice. Double down on the cycle and hope it holds. Or start asking a harder question. What does a world after debt look like? The system won't break today, probably not tomorrow, but it's not built for forever. And forever is catching up fast.